Hello everybody, my name is Patrick Coppinger and I did my project on developing new teacher training programs to help with preparedness of teaching special needs students. This first slide is just my table of contents, so here's my introduction. We'll be going over general and background information in regards to special needs students, current and popular practices in the special education field, teacher concerns, both common and specific, solutions to these concerns, common and specific, current training program / professional development, how to make a successful training program / professional development for teachers, training programs regarding common concerns, which I would consider required trainings, training programs regarding specific concerns, which I wouldn't always consider those as required training, and my conclusion and references. Introduction. Many problems may arise in today's classroom, whether it's in the form of administration, a parent, or even a student. However, there are bigger concerns than that when it comes to today's educational landscape. According to the Pew Research Center, the population of students in pre-kindergarten through 12th grade who served under IDEA has grown in both number and share over the last few decades. What does that mean? Well, IDEA stands for the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, meaning there are more special needs students in our classrooms than the past. In turn, not all teachers may know how to properly handle different scenarios with special needs students. As someone who has worked with special needs children in different environments, such as a daycare and a classroom, it's important to know how to properly handle different scenarios that may arise. Hence why we must develop programs that help teachers feel more prepared when addressing the needs of special education students. Furthermore, with uncertainty regarding the new government's administration may do to the Board of Education, it's imperative that we take steps to ensure our students get the proper education. CNN 2024. So our next slide will be about general / background information in regards to special education. So before taking a deep dive into what developing a new teacher training program centered around special education would look like, it's important to know what special education is and other useful information that surrounds it. Simply put, special education is a system of support available for students with learning differences. Rosencrantz 2021. This is a good general way to look at special education, but I would like to expand on it somewhat. Special education revolves around a lot of different needs that vary in complexity. For example, students may have learning disabilities, mental disabilities, trouble with emotional regulation, and other related troubles. Now is a good time to look at how special education compares with general education. As noted before, special education deals with various different needs a student may have. But in regards to general education, it has the same end goal. Both are looking to educate students in a way that makes them have a successful academic career. The only difference is the approaches of the two and how they achieve that. For special education, a teacher may have to take a more specific approach with students to accommodate their needs, while a teacher with general education students can use a more generalized teaching plan to teach them. Now that we have an idea of how the two compare, it's important to note the increase of special needs students. As mentioned previously, the Pew Research Center mentioned how special needs students have increased over the past decade. To be more specific, more than 7 million students, or about 14% of those aged 3 to 21 in public schools, were entitled to special services and accommodations to help with learning. Rosencrantz 2021. Based on this information, there is an upward trend of special education students in our schooling system, meaning there will be more teachers who will now be working with special needs students. Hence why it's important to develop a new teacher training program to help these teachers feel more prepared when teaching special needs students. However, what is a teacher training program, aka a professional development day? Simply put, A PD day is supposed to help teachers improve the classroom experience for both themselves and the students they're teaching. Will 2022. Our next slide will be about current and popular practices. Over many years, special education has developed and grown alongside research and practical applications in the classroom. With this growth, many standards are set in place in our schools today regarding special education. For example, integrating special needs students into the classroom is an important part of special needs students' success. According to a study done by Helen Benstead, important factors that revolve around successfully integrating a special needs student into the class is by having teachers have positive attitudes, make sure that there are peer support systems put into place, and using differentiated instruction for students when necessary. With all these concepts being used, it shows us a way to successfully integrate special needs students into the classroom. To expand upon the ideas presented, there are many tools and methods that are used to help with this. Other than differentiated instruction, the use of adaptive learning tools and individualized education programs, also known as IEPs, play an important role in having special needs students be successful in the classroom and for teachers to be successful in teaching them. Rosencrantz 2021. Finally, there is some limitation when it comes to these approaches as seen in Helen Benstead's study. For example, it is mentioned that teachers report difficulties balancing the needs of special needs students with the broader classroom demands, such as a lack of resources, a lack of training, and time constraints in the classroom. Benstead 2019. Our next slide will be talking about teacher concerns, common and specific. As previously mentioned, the number of special needs students is increasing, meaning new teachers who are not used to working with special needs students may have trouble when teaching these students. Hence, we must note what concerns teachers may have regarding teaching special needs students. Some of these concerns are regarding a lack of training, a lack of resources, and time constraints in the classroom. Benstead 2019. Those concerns are amongst the more common concerns teachers have in the classroom, but considering special education students have a wide variety of needs, there are more specific concerns as well. For example, some concerns can be related to certain needs, such as sensory processing needs in autistic students, or managing behavioral issues in students with emotional disorders. Benetti et al. 2022. Finally, it's important to note that teachers shouldn't just be concerned with their students, but also themselves. New challenges, such as working with special needs students when not given the proper resources or training, can inadvertently lead to stress and burnout, affecting both job satisfaction and retention rates for teachers in the classroom. Agyapong et al. 2022. Our next slide will be talking about solutions to these concerns, common and specific. Now that we have a general idea of teacher concerns, the question is, how do we solve them? Starting with teachers' general concerns of lack of training, resources, and time, there are many broad strategies we can use to help. Some of these are additional funding for resources, flexible classroom design, and teacher training / professional development days that focus on working with special needs students. The last one potentially being the most important, since it can help solve a wide range of these teachers' common issues in the classroom. Even with teachers' common problems being solved, teachers need to be able to handle more specific concerns as well. For example, a teacher working with a student with an emotional / behavioral disorder may want to receive behavioral management training, or a teacher may want resources to be able to use a sensory-friendly environment for students with autism spectrum disorder. De Oliveira Marquez et al. 2023. Finally, going back to teachers' mental health, teachers need to have their mental health considered while in the work environment. Ways that this could be solved is if schools prioritize and promote interventions aimed at teachers' personal well-being. Agyapong et al. 2022. If programs like these were put into place, it could help prevent teacher burnout and help with other mental health issues. Our next slide will be going over current training programs / professional development days. Just before we start discussing implementing our own training program, it is important to go over the current state of them. Current programs can be helpful to a degree, but only if run correctly. They may not be perceived as negative, and in some cases perceived as something that could be of benefit. Tantui 2020. However, less effective programs are usually run based on content knowledge and general principles which can have little to no impact and end up frustrating teachers who don't see any relevance in the work. Will 2022. Similarly, I've seen these ideas done in my own professional development days through our school district. Most was general information that made most of the attendants feel that it was a waste of time. Furthermore, I was informed that the professional development day I attended was just a repeat of last year, which isn't good for the improvement of those working in schools. Additionally, the topic was about what makes a successful student, which is helpful but had no mention of what that would look like for a special needs student. I believe this transitions well into the need for teacher feedback, considering how my own professional development day was just a repeated subject. Taking into consideration a teacher's opinion is important if you want true growth in the staff of a school. Finally, what can be improved in regard to training programs / professional development days? Well, in our case, the lack of inclusion in regard to hands-on training for special education challenges and the way content is portrayed and can be improved upon. Will 2022. Our next slide will be how to make a successful PD / training day for teachers. What does success look like in the form of special education centered training programs? First off, actually having special needs be one of the main focuses. As mentioned before, most professional development days focus on general education populations, with the little to no mention of what that means for special education. Regardless of witnessing this firsthand, we previously mentioned how teachers felt they had a lack of training and resources when working with special needs students. Benstead 2019. To make a successful program, we need to be looking at best practices for making one, such as a targeted, practical training and ongoing support. Beauvais de Poix et al. 2022. Furthermore, in the article from Education Week, it mentions what works when it comes to program creation, such as a focus on instructional practices, prioritizing concrete materials for practice, having follow-up meetings after the program's over, stating that PDs should help teachers build relationships with students, and also stating coaching and teacher collaboration are key strategies. Will 2022. This gives us a good guideline on how we should build our training program. Another important addition to our program would be incorporating methods backed by research when dealing with specific needs, such as a concept of mapping for dyslexic students. Flachos and Samfarov 2017. Finally, what can be done moving forward with these programs is feedback-based updates and follow-up meetings after programs to see if it is effective when applied to the classroom. Will 2022, Our next slide will be talking about training programs for common concerns required, meaning I believe these should be required trainings for teachers. So before going into our training program for common concerns, it is important to know what exactly that means. Simply put, it's issues that teachers are more likely to run into and will need certain trainings to deal with them daily. With that being the case, teachers will be required to partake in these programs so they can bring success into the classroom. Some of these trainings would be classroom management strategies, communication skills for interacting with parents and students, and Universal Design Principles for Accessible Learning, Oliver and Reshi, 2007. The use of simulations and role-playing can help teachers practice handling common issues with special needs students. Finally, we can assess and ensure efficacy of these programs through teacher feedback, and student outcomes can be another important key component of training sessions. Our next slide will now be talking about training programs for specific concerns, not always required trainings. So, once again, before going into our training program for specific concerns, it's important to note what exactly that means. When it comes to specific concern-centered training, it is centered on who the teacher would have in their classroom and what they're diagnosed with. Hence why it may not always be required. I would propose these as optional training modules focused on particular disabilities such as autism, dyslexia, attention deficit / hyperactivity disorder, also known as ADHD, and others in the special needs field. The use of training techniques for specific behavioral and emotional disorders is something that can be used as a part of a training program as well. For example, a training program for behavior-specific praise could be used in the case to help teachers with students with the previously mentioned disorders. Ennis et al., 2019. Finally, I believe that providing ongoing resources such as online modules or refresher courses so teachers can stay updated on best practices would be beneficial to ongoing classroom success. And finally, our next slide will be our conclusion. So, in conclusion, the need for comprehensive teacher training programs tailored to the needs of special education students is more critical than ever. As the population of special needs students continues to grow, educators must be equipped with the necessary skills, resources, and support to effectively meet the diverse needs of these students. With these guidelines in creating training programs centered around special needs students, it is possible to achieve these goals in the education space. Thank you so much for listening to my presentation. And then the last page is just my references. We have Agnew Pong, Ben Steed, Benetti, Bon de Poix, CNN, De Oliveira Marquez, Inez, Oliver, Rosenkrantz. Slides ago is the slide template that I used for this project. Schaffer, Tantoui, Flatchotes, and Will. Once again, thank you for listening to my presentation.